Okay, well the next thing we're going to look at is using a bandsaw. And the bandsaw is one of the handiest tools that you'll have in the shop. I'm going to show you this particular one and then another one we use for doing finer work. This is just a regular old Sears bandsaw. We use a 14 tooth per inch blade, bimetal, and we use this saw strictly for cutting wood. We don't use it for any other cutting any other materials. As our project, we're going to take a larger piece of spruce here, and we're going to mark it and cut it along its length in preparation for using it on a later project. So I've got my carpenter square marked, set for the distance that we want to make, and I've got my pencil, and we're just going to scribe a line along the wood. When you get used to your saw, you'll know how much allowance to make. I generally scribe the wood exactly to the finished dimension, and then I cut outside that line, because we'll use, in the next portion of the video, we'll use a planer to do the finish. It's a good idea, once you have your piece marked out, that you want to mark which side is the drop, meaning the part that's going to be left over. And I generally just put an X there. And so this is the part we're going to be using. This is our 1.5 inch piece. And then this is the drop. And that way I know if I come back or a different time, I know exactly where we are. So the next thing we're going to do is set this up on the saw, and we're going to cut along this. Okay, you want to turn the saw off and wait for the blade to completely stop. Now we have our piece that we've ripped. This is the drop, and this is the piece that we're going to keep working on. And if I turn it towards you, you can see, we have marks from the saw, but not a whole lot, and we'll be able to smooth that out with the planer. Okay. So now we're going to make a second cut to bring our piece down to 3/4 of an inch wide by 1.5 inches. And I've placed my mark here, the X, to show which side is the drop. Okay, you want to turn the saw off again and let it come to a complete stop. And so now we've used the bandsaw to rough cut this piece of spruce to 1.5 inches by 3/4 inches. Okay, so another use for the bandsaw here is to rough out some of your plywood parts that you have to make repetitively. This was our pattern that we used earlier. We're going to have a finished product like this, and we cut our strips with the table saw earlier in the program. So now I'm going to use my pattern and create a sharp point on my pencil, and I'm going to center my template on our piece of plywood, and we're going to mark it out. And this is where having a sharp pencil is important, because you want the lines to be all the same width as you make these parts repetitive, so that they're all similar or interchangeable. And all I'm drawing right now is the outline. And then we're going to use the bandsaw to rough cut it out. So there you can see we've done an outline of our rib pattern. And I'll make a second one. Okay. So we're just going to cut, and we're going to leave about 3/32 of material. This is just an expedient way to rip down our aircraft plywood for the next stage of making these finished ribs. I'm staying outside of my pencil line deliberately on purpose. So we finished cutting out our blanks of our ribs, and as you can see, I've left an edge of about 3/32, 1/8 of an inch all the way around. The bandsaw is very useful for a lot of things other than just ripping long pieces of wood. This is a narrow width blade, so we can't do very deep cuts. You might have to find someone who has a saw that's suitable for that. Generally, I'd say 3 inches is about all you're going to want to do on a deep cut, and not have the blade wander through the height of the wood. You always want to check to make sure that your table is perpendicular to your blade, and if you want to make an angle cut on a strip of wood for a trailing edge or something, you can get your handy digital inclinometer, set it at 0 when you know the blade's perpendicular, and then adjust the angle of the table until you have the angle you want, 7, 10 degrees, whatever, and then lock it down. You can use similar fences, like a cross-cut fence, on the bandsaw, and this allows you to do repetitive cutting. If you had dowels or sticks that you wanted to cut to a certain length, you could put a block just in front of the blade, and you could put your stock in there and cut it, and then feed another piece through and cut it, and you'd get repetitively accurate cuts of the same length. So there's a lot of utility in that. And of course, if you want to make an angle cut, you could adjust the angle on the cross fence. Okay, so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about another type of bandsaw. This is just a tabletop 9-inch bandsaw, and they're very handy to have. You can move it around the shop wherever you need it. It has a very thin kerf blade, meaning it doesn't make a big cut through your wood, and so the blade is very flexible and allows you to do a lot of bending. Here I have a sample of our Jenny nose rib, and we have this radius, which would be difficult to do on the straight bandsaw that we just demonstrated, but I'll be able to follow that curve very accurately. Okay, so now you can see with the thin kerf blade, which is flexible, I can cut very accurately along a curved surface and almost completely finish this. We just probably run it with a sanding paper to take any edge off and to take the burr off the wood. But a little saw like this is real handy. You can very quickly do jobs and get them close to being finished and ready to go.